And now it's my absolute pleasure to welcome on stage our founder and CTO, Shay Banon. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. So I'll do a short opening and then hand it over to Uri to talk a bit about the history of Elastic, the products, and the development that we're doing. I don't know how many people know, but we started Elastic here in Amsterdam as a company. I moved here to start the company together with 3 other founders. Actually, one of the first talks that I gave ever about Elasticsearch was here in this venue, which is a beautiful venue. I think in one of the DevOps days or something along those lines. And I think we've progressed quite a bit since then. Back then, I was a CTO of the company, spending most of my time, coding Elasticsearch and helping build the company, giving training, giving support to customers, and so on. And at one point, I moved to become a CEO of Elastic. Actually, moved to the Bay Area. But a few months ago, I moved back to be a CTO of Elastic. I got demoted. I'm joking. I really enjoy the technical aspects and building technical products and helping engage as much as possible with the technical team and the product team. And that's where my biggest passion lies. And I was really excited about Ash being able to take over as a CEO. And since then, I thought it makes sense to share with you a bit about where I focused as a CTO and what we're building. And Uri will talk a bit about that as well. When at least I built Elasticsearch and afterwards the team and everything that we built around it, one of the things that I deeply believe in is the power of search. The ability to put any type of data and being able to go and search it. The ability to put the search box in front of a customer that tries to go and buy something online, in front of an SRE that tries to understand why the system is not performing well, or a security professional that try to find threats across mountains of data. All of them to us are search experiences. Obviously, you tailor them, you make them specialized in the context of the use case, and we've done that. But at the heart of it, a lot of it is, to us at least, a search experience. It's a single platform, single experience. And for many years, we were focused on building this platform, but also trying to make sure that we have the right people at Elastic to help build these solutions. So for example, I remember a few years ago, we were meeting with really large customers that were using Elastic as a threat hunting platform, what is called SIEM or SIEM. And to be honest, we were talking to the teams there, the threat hunters, the security professionals, and I could talk data and I could talk search and I could talk about how to make it fast all day long, but I don't come from a security background. So for many years, we focused on trying to add these type of capabilities and people into Elastic. For example, by joining forces and acquiring a company called Endgame that developed one of the best endpoint technologies in the world that help us bring all of that security DNA to Elastic as well. And our security team now is doing wonders both in SIEM and endpoint and threat hunting and analysis of the threat landscapes that we have. And I urge you to go and read a lot about it on our website. So when I moved back to be a CTO, I was actually very happy with the maturity of our solutions. In enterprise search, I would say we're leading the pack. In observability, we were one of the first companies to realize the value of observability as a solution. We got into APM, infrastructure monitoring, continuous profiling now. So a lot of advancements are happening in that space. And the same thing in security. We are probably one of the most popular, if not the popular, SIEM vendor in the world today. We're being used a lot thanks to our bottom-up, community-based adoption of our software. And obviously now with endpoint security and container security and other aspects. So there was a lot of maturity there. And then I looked back into the platform, what we call the platform, Elasticsearch, Kibana. And I said, what would happen if I would sit down and decide to write Elasticsearch today? Would you make the same architectural decisions? Would you build it the same way? Now, 12 years have passed, or 13 years have passed since Elasticsearch was built. Back then, I think it was one of the better distributed system experiences that you would have. You would start it up, running it in the cloud in EC2. Machines were coming and going in the cloud. It was an interesting place to live at back then. But also on-prem, you would start nodes and they would connect and talk to each other. And it was a relatively pleasant experience for a distributed system. But even for that distributed system, it still like manages state locally. The way that it works is like any other distributed systems that were built at the time. Now, if you fast forward to today, you see that many distributed systems are built in a more of a, I would say cloud native way, right? It's like, where do you put state, for example? You would probably focus on putting state in a system like S3 or Google Cloud Storage, or blob storage or Azure blob storage. Like you would decouple compute from storage, for example, to make sure that you put the data in place that is dedicated to it and don't have to manage the persistency and high availability of the data. And you would focus a lot on what shape of the data that you put there, how you index the data, how do you process the data to put it there, and how you search it. So we spend a lot of time in Elastic to figure out, can we decouple compute from storage? And that's a pretty tricky thing to do for a search engine. Search engine has very different access patterns, very different ways to operate. But we found a way to do it, and we blogged about it, and Uri will talk about it a bit more later on. And we're on a path now to build something that we call stateless Elasticsearch. So basically move all the state to be stored on something like S3 or blob storage, and focusing on the processing of the data, the indexing part and the search part. This makes Elasticsearch much more lightweight. When it starts up, it can start up very quickly. It can decide to cache the data based on your access patterns. Indexing only happened once instead of happening multiple times when you replicate data and push the data to S3. That's a huge architectural change. Now, the nice thing is that most of the APIs and a big part of the semantics, we managed to figure out how to keep it the same. And the idea is obviously for these two modes to operate side by side. So, if you're using our cloud, for example, it still has the existing replication and deployment model. And the idea is that a year or 2 years from now, it's going to take some time to develop. This thing will get deployed on our cloud, and you can decide to deploy it either in a stateless mode or in the previous mode. That's a very, very exciting development. And I would probably argue that Elasticsearch is the most popular search engine in the world today. And people that use it gets really empowered and can realize the value of search across any type of data. And that change means that I have much more confidence in Elasticsearch still being around for you, the users that use it for search, for 10 years to come. Who knows what happens in 10 years. Another big change that we worked on, as an example, and again, like this is a platform play, is a query engine and a query language. If you think about Elasticsearch in the way that it works today, and again, like the focus for me at least is back into the platform, is that it pushes the search next to where the data is. So it's the query engine or the query logic in Elasticsearch is relatively simplistic. Like, I know where the data exists, I'll push the data there and start to execute the queries and come back. That's amazing. That's what makes search extremely fast. You run the searches next to where the data is. But it doesn't have a lot of smarts in the coordinating part, like the query engine itself. It just like goes and distributes it and gets it back. We decided to build a query engine, like a proper query engine that understands the query, understands what needs to happen, how to push data in a smart way against the various places or shards where the data exists. Be smart in being able to, for example, allow you to do lookups and joins and a lot of query time capabilities that so far we relied more on index time capabilities. If you know languages like Splunk query language or even your Unix pipes that you're using, that's inspired in terms of a query language, that inspired the query itself and how it performs. And I'm really excited about this development because it means that for the first time in a search engine and in Elasticsearch specifically, you're going to have a proper query engine running. If you're familiar with things like Trino, in terms of how it works against a Parquet file and things along those lines, again, inspired by these smart query engines that know how to execute queries efficiently. And obviously, that's going to work really nicely with the stateless architecture even more, right? Because once you know where the data exists and where to send the request, and you'll be able to do much more when it comes to query time capabilities, like joins. Why not have joins in Elasticsearch? Nothing stops us from doing that, or lookups. And those are just two things, and you'll get a chance to hear about quite a bit more capabilities, but those are just two things that we're developing. And the thing that I get really excited about is the power of our platform. Hopefully you're using, maybe just our platform, Elasticsearch and Kibana directly. Hopefully you're using our solutions if you're using observability or logging and APM or SIEM and security and all of the detection rules and all the work that we're doing around it, and web crawler if you're trying to search on a website. Those two changes are going to have the same impact across all of these solutions. So it means that if you're using observability, or if you're using security, if you're using SIEM, if you're storing endpoint data from Elastic or from other tools in Elasticsearch itself or in Elastic, if you're using observability logs or APM traces, if you're putting your online websites or e-commerce sites or backing applications and putting it into Elastic, all of these capabilities are going to immediately benefit from one implementation of stateless Elasticsearch. Like we don't have to go and figure out how do we do stateless everything and decouple compute from storage from everywhere. ESQL, this new query language, which, by the way, a side note, a bit of a story on the culture of Elastic a bit. We had a whole debate around how to name the query language, ESQL. And I wanted to call it Aqua, because then we get a chance to call a query language Aqua Lung. And I got really excited about like a Jethro Tull references, and I was thinking about like playing it or something like that. I got outvoted, so we're calling it ESQL. It's not SQL, it's Elasticsearch Query Language. But the exciting thing about it is that think about the power that we put at your hands when it comes to a pipe-based query language with a proper query engine behind it, that allows you to search the same way across APM traces, across security events, across logs, across infrastructure monitoring, being able to easily combine the data together through joins or through streams, do lookups. All of these things are going to be at your power, and you won't have to go to different tools and understand different query languages. It's all going to be powered by the same interface and the same capability. So that, to me, is extremely exciting. That's where, some of the areas where I focused a lot when it comes to Elastic, and that speaks, I think, to the power play of a platform that, focuses on search as an experience, and being able to double down on that and give you, hopefully, a huge impact to the changes that we make. And, by learning logs, you now know how to do traces, you now know how to do security. And as Matt said, we see all of these things converging and being used more and more by single teams or single units that try to figure out how to solve it. So with that, I'll hand it over to Uri to talk about the history a bit and where we came from and the future and where we're heading. Thank you very much, everybody. See you later.
Thank you, Shay. Wow, this is amazing. I can't remember when I spoke in front of so many people. This is awesome. Thank you all for coming. So I'm Uri Cohen. I'm a product lead in our platform team. And as Shay mentioned, I'm going to give you a short trip down memory lane first, and then talk a little bit about what we've been up to in the recent releases and what we're going to do in the next few releases. So this year we're celebrating 10 years of Elastic, which is pretty awesome. So thank you, Shay, for starting the company. Thank you all for being for partnering with us along the way, and it's been quite a ride. So let's kind of look at the first 5 years. In the first 5 years, we actually concentrated on solidifying the platform and building more capabilities. So starting from the release of Elasticsearch itself, the addition of Logstash and Kibana, which we all lovingly call the Elk Stack, and then joining forces with Found, which laid the foundations to Elastic Cloud, and then Packetbeat, which laid the foundation for Beats, and Prelert, which is the foundation for all of our machine learning and anomaly detection capabilities. The following 5 years were focused on solidifying our solution story. Observe, search, observe, and protect, our search, observability, and security solutions. So in 2017, we joined forces with Upbeat and released our APM offering. Then SwiftType, bringing our search experience up a few levels, purged an endgame for endpoint security, and then more recently, build security for cloud security posture management, CMD for cloud workload protection, and optimize for continuous profiling and observability. So a lot of awesome folks we joined forces with to solidify our offerings. So what do people do with Elasticsearch, right? We find things. We do ride sharing. I'm sure everyone here used Uber or some other ride sharing app. And whenever you call a taxi, a search happens behind the scenes. And a search is not just like typing a text and getting an answer. It's really faceting and being able to geographically contain the search so you get most relevant results. Similarly, folks look up for restaurants on Yelp. And that's a very, very similar search experience, right? All the facets of search that we talked about based on, full text search and geolocation and faceting and analysis and everything that search is involved in. But it's much more than that. It's about files and emails and logs and threats and a bunch of other use cases. I think Matt covered it really well. Many of our customers use search for so many use cases, and we're really proud of that partnership. Now, it also, a lot thanks to the huge community that we have. And just look at these numbers, 3.6 billion downloads for the Elastic Stack products. This is pretty mind-blowing for, it's not a consumer product, and it's so widely used. Over 100K GitHub stars, thousands upon thousands of committers and authors. This would all not be possible without you, our community, so thank you again for that. Now, let's kind of talk about why Elasticsearch has become so popular. So I don't need to tell you that data is exploding worldwide, and I think, what is it, 4.8 exabytes? Yeah, so there's a lot of data, but the unique thing about it is that the type of data that is exploding. It's not just structured data, it's unstructured data, right? So starting from machine logs, through user comments on a website, through just regular text, through things like images and videos, it's unstructured data that is growing the fastest. And that's why Elastic is so successful. We know how to bring the ability to analyze and search structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data all in one platform. And let's talk about it from a few perspectives. This actually maps directly to the three solutions that we have, right? So if you're observing your IT environment, you need to correlate logs with metrics, with APM traces, with profiling traces, with data about how users are experiencing your services through real user monitoring and synthetic monitoring, and be able to search and analyze all the data as a whole. And this is why you need a platform like the Elastic Stack. Similarly with security, multiple data sources from network logs to cloud logs to host logs to audit logs. All of that data needs to be brought into one data store and be analyzed uniformly. And again, very different across many types of data that you want to do it for. And then lastly, search, whether it's a user-facing search, a text box on your website or in your application, or giving your own employees access to their data. They want to search an email, they want to look up the latest customer record, they want to move between one to the other. And this is where enterprise search comes in, right? So essentially, all of our solutions, observability, security, and enterprise search, are data problems, and unstructured data problems for the most part. So let's talk about what you need to actually implement those things. So the first thing you need to do to be able to do very well is ingest the data. And ingesting doesn't only mean writing a client to ship data through the APIs. It means providing you with out-of-the-box capabilities to ingest various types of data sources. We have hundreds of pre-built integrations. It means being able to automatically crawl a website or connect to your enterprise data sources and fetch data from there, and making the data more structured and more understandable. Then as it goes into the platform, being able to store it efficiently, right? Whatever the data type is, whether it's text or metrics or traces, you need to be able to store it efficiently for however long you need it. You need to be able to search on it. And again, search doesn't just include inverted text search, it includes faceting, and it includes aggregations, and it includes a lot of other things, and machine learning. And then you want to be able to analyze it and make sense of it. As the data grows, the ability of a human to actually look at the data and make sense of it is actually reduced, and then you need things like machine learning and anomaly detection to do the job for you and help you focus on what matters most. And lastly, you want to visualize and explore the data. And so many folks know Kibana as a visualization tool. You create visualizations and dashboards, and that's awesome. But it's not just about that. It's about providing the best user experience for the problem at hand. If you're analyzing your application through APM, you want to see a service map, and you want to see the interaction of the components in your system, right? And if you're hunting for threats, you want to see a timeline for how that threat evolved throughout your systems. And you want to be able to gather evidence and attach them to those timelines, right? And so what we're doing with Kibana as well is providing those more curated use case specific experiences well beyond just dashboards and visualizations. And so obviously this all maps to the stack itself, starting from the hundreds of integrations that I mentioned through Elasticsearch, and Shay mentioned some of the exciting things that we're doing in that front, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And ending with Kibana, which is the window to the Elastic Stack and the provider of all those experiences that are tailored for what you want to do with the platform. All right, so let's dive into some of the things we've been up to recently and some of the things we're planning. So we'll start with observability. And observability started from humble beginnings with logs, Logstash, and the ability to transform and enrich logs and put them in Elasticsearch and then have very quick search applications to them, regardless of how big the data is. But it's way more than that now. There's APM, which I mentioned. There's infrastructure monitoring. I have a Kubernetes cluster. I want to know what's going on there. See the metrics, see the pods. This is what infrastructure monitoring is about. Synthetic monitoring. We're actually releasing, I'm going to talk about in a second, a fully managed synthetic service that will allow you to tell how your users are experiencing your applications from their perspective. Continuous profiling, which is also very exciting. The ability to do zero instrumentation and understand how your applications are behaving and what consumes the most CPU. So all of that is part of a unified observability experience. Now, in the 7x release timeframe, we focused on a few things. We focused on building out the APM solution and providing end-to-end visibility with things like distributed tracing and service maps and adding a machine learning layer on top of it. We focused on making the data collection and ingestion process much, much simpler through the formation of a uniform agent. So you don't have to go and install hundreds of specific Beats integrations and configure them, each one individually. You just install one unified agent and enable those integrations with a click of a button from within Kibana. And that literally supports hundreds of thousands of connected agents into a single cluster. Streamlining cloud data ingestion from things like supporting cloud-native data sources like Firehose and others, ingesting data from AWS and Azure and GCP. So we've released a number of built-in integrations that do not require you to install any software, but just like fetch the data from the cloud-native data sources as it is. And then native support for OpenTelemetry. This is a big thing. We've been hearing this from our customers for quite a bit. It's an awesome standard that's forming, and everyone is aligning with that. And Elastic now natively supports OpenTelemetry sources, right? So you can trace your applications and visualize them and understand how your application is behaving through OpenTelemetry. And then unifying all of that into one single experience. We don't want to have like a logs application and an APM application and a metrics application and have them be detached from one another. When you're actually troubleshooting a problem, you want to look at all of these things and understand what's going on. It's just different perspectives for how your system is behaving. So having a unified observability experience is really, really important in that sense. Then in the 8x timeline, we've focused on what we call actionable observability. So again, data is growing and it's becoming untenable for one human to actually look at graphs and charts all day and understand what's going on. So we need things like AIOps, using our machine learning and anomaly detection capabilities to make sense of the data and to help you focus on what matters most and identify the anomalies. Automating root cause analysis, understanding what are the factors that, for example, caused a spike in the rate of logs or a slowdown in the responsiveness of your web server. Accelerate cloud-native visibility with the ability, for example, to implement APM on top of serverless applications with AWS Lambda. And then lastly, expanding the observability, shifting left to your CI and CD pipelines, which is also part of our applications. If your CI/CD pipelines are slow, you also want to know about it, right? Because it's slowing down your business, because it's hurting you. So it's just as important as monitoring applications at runtime. So we've provided with the capabilities to detect and observe CI and CD pipelines. So what are we going to focus on observability in the coming few months and years? I mentioned continuous profiling. This is really exciting. Following an acquisition, we merged forces with the team from Optimize. We're hard at work in integrating that natively into the platform. And you probably noticed that one of the things we do as we join forces with our companies is building those experiences natively in the platform. So you always use one single platform, and it's not like a collection of disparate tools that you need to work with, right? And so the thing we're working on right now is actually taking the awesome things that came from joining forces with Optimize and making it an embedded part of the platform. And by doing so, enabling you to profile applications with very, very minimal overhead and understand how they're doing without any instrumentation. This is using eBPF at the Linux kernel level. So it's pretty exciting and advanced. I mentioned synthetics. So we're going to roll out a global synthetic service, fully managed service across multiple geolocations in the world that will allow you to actually record, basically point and click and capture user transactions on your website and understand how your users are experiencing your services, right? And then run those and have a combined view with all the other facets of observability. So that's coming very soon, very, very exciting. And lastly, doubling down on AIOps and machine learning, again, being able to make sense of all this data without having to actually look at tons of graph and just let the system kind of do things for you and figure out what are the things you actually need to care about and look at. So next, I'm going to move to security. And one of the words we used is limitless for security. Limitless actually means that you shouldn't have to drop data on the floor or decide which data sources you want to collect data from and which you can't because it's going to cost you too much or it's going to be too big to be able to search on. And so this is what we focus on. And Elastic Security is not just about collecting data and analyzing threats through log messages. It's also about endpoint protection. And we mentioned Endgame. And what we've done after the Endgame acquisition is actually integrate the endpoint protection capabilities that they brought with them into the platform to form what we call XDR, basically a unified platform for both observing threats and protecting your endpoints. And so in the 7X release, we focused on a few things around that. So integrating the endgame agent, eliminating blind spots through allowing you to ingest more data, integrating with more security native data sources, automate detections by bringing external threat detection information, and preventing ransomware and malware at the endpoint level, right? So as soon as you basically install the Elastic Agent, enable endpoint protection, you're going to be protected from ransomware and malware. And then in the 8X timelines, we focused on increasing visibility, adding additional threat intelligence data feeds so that everything we do at the SIEM level is actually enriched by things like Akamai and semantic endpoint protection and other data sources that will allow us to detect the most recent attacks and threats. It's optimizing analyst workflows through the use of security cases and allowing you to enrich data and collect evidence much more easily. Minimizing the dwell time. Again, kind of going back to AIOps, this is what Shay mentioned. Whenever we build the functionality at the platform level, we can use it in all the solutions. So we have anomaly detection capabilities at the platform level, which allows us to actually minimize dwell time of threats because we can actually look at those threats and analyze them automatically and identify them preemptively. And then the focus on cloud security. This is both for your cloud security posture. You have a Kubernetes cluster, you've configured that. Is it vulnerable? Are you doing some configuration mistakes? Similarly for your AWS account, is my IAM policy okay? Or did I leave some default behind that is going to be a backdoor for some intruder to go into my systems and harm them? And then cloud workload protection, actively protecting workload as it kind of runs in your system without needing to additionally instrument and change your applications. So what's next for security? Native response action, like we've been hearing I've been in a customer dinner yesterday, and I think one of the names that, or the terms that came up the most is SOAR, Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response, and the ability to actually take action on the data, right? So the platform itself is very powerful in detecting threats and identifying them. Now, what do you do with it? You want to have automated response actions. You want to block a process at the source. You want to disconnect the host from the network. So automating all of these response actions is part of the natural workflow without having to resort to humans or to additional platforms. Threat intelligence management, again, adding more of those threat intelligence sources to broaden the ability to detect threats. I mentioned cloud workload protection. This is also using eBPF, by the way. So this is following the joining forces with a company called CMD. So bringing over the Linux kernel expertise to be able to actually protect your cloud workloads when they're running on Linux. And then cloud security posture management, CSPM, to be able to tell you whether your configuration and posture is good or whether you have vulnerabilities. And then lastly, understanding entities, identifying them from the data, and applying behavioral analytics to those entities to be able to say if they're doing something suspicious, right? So not just detecting threats from logs and metrics, but actually understanding what's in them and being able to detect whether behaviorally someone is doing something anomalous. So that's security. Lastly, search, right? So search is kind of our bread and butter, the original use case. We have a lot of capabilities there. It's not just about writing applications against the Elasticsearch API. It's allowing you to tune the relevance more easily. It's allowing you to connect and collect data from web sources very, very easily, to connect to your enterprise data sources and collect data from there, and then tune the relevance, right? So a lot of these ready-made tools that will make building search applications a lot easier. And so in the 7X timeframe, we've focused on making all those tools much more readily available within Kibana for whoever is building search applications. There's an awesome library called SearchUI. So if you're building search applications on your websites, this is an awesome library to use, making it a lot easier, saving you a lot of time. Reducing time to value by if you want to implement a search box on your website. Just a web crawler. Just point it to your website, let it crawl, and you have a search application, right? You don't need to go and implement all this yourself. And then focusing on how we optimize search results, tuning relevance, all visually, very, very easily, very, very interactively. Then in the 8.0 timeframe, we've been focusing on enhancing the underlying search capabilities. So semantic search, natural language processing, and all of that happening through what we call vector similarity search. So being able to take textual documents or even images, turn them into dense vectors through some machine learning models, and then being able to search in them, right? And this brings the whole world of contextual search into Elasticsearch. And the real power is actually in combining traditional search, inverted index, with contextual search and bringing you the best out of both worlds. So this is what we're going to be focusing on. Again, unifying all of these more, I guess, classic search techniques and modern search techniques that are vector-based and machine learning-based, and tying them together in a way that's really, really easy to use and will bring you the best results in every search that you make. Enabling sophisticated use cases, right? Things like e-commerce and providing out-of-the-box models for that. And also understanding how users are experiencing searches and implementing machine learning models to actually learn how to rank searches better and provide the best experience to your users. And again, all of that embedded in the platform, very, very easy to use. It's gonna be awesome. All right, so this was our solutions, and now we're gonna focus on the platform, on the Elastic Stack itself, right? This is, as Shay mentioned, this is kind of our, hidden superpower. We do everything at the platform level, and it has a force multiplier across all of these three solutions. So in the 7X timelines, we've been focusing on optimizing for cost and performance, right? Reducing TCOs with things like data tiers, allowing you to trade off cost for performance, right? So if you have logs or metrics, it's actually really important that you have fast search response times for the first week. But then as data ages, it becomes less relevant, right? And you don't care much about the performance. You just want to keep it there in case you want to investigate something. Similarly for security, you save, say, compliance data. Typically, you don't search on it on a day-to-day basis, but when the auditor comes in, you want to be able to do it, even if it takes a minute or two. Right, so this is where data tiers and searchable snapshots have become really, really important, and we focus on this. Searchable snapshots is the ability to go and search directly on S3, and it's actually the foundation for the stateless architecture that Shay has mentioned. Accelerating time to value and streamlining data analysis with things like Lens. So I don't know if you've used Lens before, but I think it's an awesome tool that is so easy to work on data and visualize it, and basically brings the whole visualization experience to the next level. Then in the 8.0 timeframe, focusing on scale and relevance, we mentioned vector searches. So the ability to take those dense vectors, typically with a few hundreds, even thousands of dimensions, and return search responses quickly enough with algorithms like HNSW. Making the vector search experience native into the platform. So a single _search endpoint that will allow you to use both vector search and traditional BM25 searches. Bringing in machine learning models like PyTorch, and allowing you to use those to implement NLP, sentiment analysis, and all these awesome things that come with the ability to search your data contextually. And with that, unlock a whole new class of use cases, like image searches. You can actually do image searches with vectors. All right, so this is the first time we can do these kinds of things within Elasticsearch. Now, what's coming? So Shay kind of stole my thunder, but beyond the ESQL query language, which is really exciting, and the stateless architecture. By the way, there's another talk about stateless architecture later in the day, so if you are interested, I really recommend going and watching it. We talked about multiple types of data, structured, unstructured, and the need to save and store all of those efficiently, right? And so one of the biggest focus points for us was how to save time series data more efficiently. This is what the time series database effort is around, being able to store metric data much more efficiently, reducing the storage footprint, and allowing you to implement search on this data much more faster. So that's the platform. Now the other thing that's worth mentioning. So our motto has always been to be for our customers where they are. If you're using a cloud provider, we want to be there for you and support you in whatever region you may be, right? So we support all the big 3 cloud providers across 53 regions globally. So pretty much almost any region you can think of, and we're expanding. And then if you want to use things self-managed, you can do that as well, either directly or through Kubernetes with a tool like ECK. So a lot of options to consume our products, and you can also do both, right? A lot of our customers are actually migrating to cloud, but they can't do it all at once. So they want to use a hybrid setup. And so all these things are possible. Another quick word about our integration with marketplaces. A lot of users actually have commitments to those cloud providers, so you can now purchase Elastic Cloud through any of the big cloud provider marketplaces, and use your committed spend to that effect, right? So it's a much more easier way to purchase if you already engage with the cloud providers. And lastly, certifications. You see here a bunch of logos. We pretty much have all the important certifications, whether it's PCI, ISO, FedRAMP, TISAX. There's a bunch of those that Elastic Cloud has been certified for over the last few years. Trust me, it wasn't an easy feat. So this is actually to make sure that when you go and use our cloud service, you have a peace of mind in whichever industry you're at. So this was kind of a short trip down history lane, and then some of the things we're doing. There's a lot more stuff coming up, and some awesome sessions throughout the day to kind of dive deeper into a lot of the things that I mentioned. But with that, I wanted to thank you, then pass it over to Stefan, one of our customers from Swift. Stefan. Thank you, everyone.